After a tough series loss to the Celtics, is Miami's window for a title run closed? We debate that possibility as there is increased speculation that Jimmy Butler might be traded this offseason, and at least one Eastern Conference rival seems very interested. Could it actually happen? We'll get to that and more on today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. I'm Wes Goldberg, editor at allyoucanheat.com. Joining me as always, credentialed Heat media member David Ramil. However you're tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. I've got some Jimmy Butler trade ideas to get to later on in the show. We're still talking about the fallout of Pat Riley's press conference and what he said about Jimmy Butler when asked about whether or not he or the Heat would consider trading Jimmy. Pat Riley first responded, no. And that was, David, sort of the quote going around the internet because we had heard so much Jimmy Butler trade speculation in the days leading up to Monday's press conference. But after Pat Riley said no, he then added a little something at the end.
If you guys determine over the coming weeks and months that your non-Jimmy and non-Bam assets are not enough to appeal to other teams to get a quality player back, an all-star, someone of that ilk in return, would you then at that point have to at least be open to considering a trade for Jimmy?
No. Not right now. I appreciate the question, but that one is that, as Spo said the other day, I concur with everything that Spo said because he and I had discussed this, is that there's a possibility that a lot of things are on the table, from that standpoint.
We get a definitive no, and then a whole lot of hemming and hawing and qualifiers and, well, maybe, but also a lot of things are on the table, but not right now, but maybe someday. That's not right now. I don't know. David, what did you make of that answer?
Well, I mean, I certainly don't accept it as that they wouldn't trade Jimmy Butler. I'd love to believe. Yeah, I think I would not want to listen to Pat Riley, hear him say specifically, I would trade or I wouldn't trade Jimmy Butler. But he said nothing there. Even if you look at the context of the question, it's if you can't move Tyler for Donovan Mitchell, basically, if you try exploring every other avenue to get an all-star to rebuild this team into what a lot of people might perceive as title contention, would then you consider moving Jimmy and kind of reopening a new window for title contention? And he goes, no, but not right now. Maybe a year later if we're at an impasse with this whole stupid contract extension, maybe at the trade deadline, if somebody comes up with a big enough offer and we can't, even field a winning team, maybe, a lot of things on the table. Spo and I talk all the time. I concur with everything he says. And then later on the press conference, he also adds that he fights with Spo all the time. So nothing that Pat Riley said in that response can be taken at face value or is absolutely 100% factual.
What I take from it is that he is open to trading Jimmy Butler.
Yeah.
And he should be, by the way. There is no reason why he shouldn't be. They should be open to everything. This team failed in its pursuit of a championship. And Jimmy Butler's lack of availability was a big reason for that failure. Probably the biggest reason of anything else was the fact that Jimmy Butler wasn't available. And you and I talked yesterday about how frustrated Pat Riley clearly was about Jimmy's lack of availability because it just feels like he couldn't get an actual read on this team. I've thought about this now for 24 hours since the press conference. And I think that Pat Riley will be open to trading Jimmy Butler, depending on how the contract negotiations go. I don't know that he wants to even engage in those contract negotiations.
I would say
at this point, right? Yeah. I don't think that there is a number, unless Jimmy Butler comes in and says, I'll play for $15 million a year if I get that extra year. It would have to just be like this, an offer that this front office literally cannot refuse. But this is all to go on. Pat Riley talked about, and I thought it was kind of an interesting tangent that he went on of one of several, but talking about how they had planned for years for the free agency in 2010 of LeBron, Dwayne Wade, and Chris Bosh. I'm like, why is he bringing that up right now? And I don't know that it was necessarily I don't really remember what the context of the question or the response was, but You look ahead and what Miami's cap sheet looks like in the summer of 2026 and the free agents who are going to be available there. You sign Jimmy Butler to an extension that pays him $40, $50 million, whatever it's going to be, if they do sign it that year, that is $50 million out of your potential cap space in a year that right now you only have Bam. Well, you only have Tyler Hero under contract for that year. I'm going to assume they're going to sign Bam to an extension. Bam will be under contract for something like, I have it written down here, it's like $30-something million. No, $53 million that year. Would around that, if he signs that 3-year extension that he's going to be eligible for this summer. Bam's either going to sign that this summer or next summer. There's less of a rush on him to sign it than there is for Jimmy to sign it. So
sure.
I'm going to go ahead and assume Bam's under contract. Maybe Tyler's under contract with the Heat. Maybe that contract is on somebody else's.
Even on that roster.
You're right. Yeah, maybe it's on somebody else's cap book. But essentially, the Heat's entire situation is wide open for that summer. And I'm not, and there would still be max cap space if they were to retain Jimmy Butler for another year, potentially. And that's even, but you know, it is a $50 million ish albatross that you have to think about in reshaping the roster of that team, and that's money that could otherwise be distributed elsewhere. That's not really what I wanted to say here, but I do think it's just things that they're talking about, and it's why I don't think that the Heat are very motivated to sign Jimmy Butler to an extension. Why, if they had their bones, they would just have him play it out, or as you theorized yesterday, I think it was a great theory. Maybe they're just sort of gently pushing Jimmy Butler over the edge to pursue a trade somewhere else, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's been 24 hours or a little over as we're recording this, and no response. And we wouldn't assume that there was. There was a statement that was given by Bernie Lee, Jimmy's agent. I mean, it was kind of,
well, again, yeah, he told to the Sun Sentinel, yeah.
He didn't really say much of anything. He just kind of replied saying that, you know, this idea of Jimmy picking and choosing games is not true. Well, it kind of is. I mean, there has
true.
Like absence. There absolutely is. Like, I mean,
we watched this season, David. We watched every minute of this season. Jimmy Butler was not available, and for Bernie Lee to come out and say like, "Oh, these were real injuries." Okay, well, how do you explain Game 3 of the regular season taking that off for rest?
Right.
Since when is rest in Game 3 a real injury?
Right, or all of the entirety of the preseason,
or you know, the 15 games where he showed up but was actively disinterested. Like, we don't even consider that, you know. Right. Like, how many times did we get on the show and blame Jimmy Butler for a loss because he was just passing through the building for 48 minutes, you know, and that doesn't even include the games that he did play.
No, I mean, it's really interesting that he would come out and say that, but you would expect that. Like, that's, as an agent, sure, that's his job. He has to protect his client. He's trying to generate as much positive interest as possible here. You know, it's been a very strange news cycle between everything that's gone out with Pat Riley and the non-statement or non-response really from Jimmy and his agent and everything else. So I would just say that, to your point earlier, I don't think that you can operate this summer without the idea of trading Jimmy. Like, it has to be on the table. And I think Pat kind of says it, you say it, and you have to at least entertain the possibility, because if as he theorized yesterday, Bernie Lee and Jimmy Butler walk into Pat's office as soon as that deadline passes where they can talk about the extension, they demand an unrealistic number, and they're not willing to include any kind of clauses regarding number of games played or how far they can take them into the playoffs or anything else like that, then like that's a non-starter as a negotiation. You can't really have that conversation. And if negotiations go on and they're more and more contentious, well, I think Pat has to entertain the idea of trading Jimmy Butler. And you hope that it doesn't get to that point. And I don't think anybody wants that. I certainly don't think the Heat front office do. I think they want Jimmy to show up and play 70 goddamn games and be the best version of Jimmy Butler during the regular season and still somehow have these phenomenal performances in the playoffs that we've grown accustomed to seeing. And I don't know that that's realistic. And I don't know that that's possible. So I don't know if Jimmy can promise that. I don't know if Jimmy's agent can promise that. And I don't know if there's a possibility that Jimmy's even capable of reaching those levels anymore that consistently at this point in his career.
It's not possible. And I'll tell you what that means for the Miami Heat and Jimmy Butler's future after this.
Today's episode is brought to you by DoorDash. Look, Mother's Day coming up later this weekend. That doesn't mean that you don't have time to plan something. If you want to take care of your mom, let's say, my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law is a huge chocolate fan. You get her from her local chocolatier or candy shop, any place that she likes. You get it delivered right to her door on DoorDash. I think my wife is planning something similar to that. You know what? It's a great idea because moms, you got to take care of them. You got to show them how much you appreciate and how much you love them. And if that's the case, then DoorDash is the option for you. If your mom has a sweet tooth, is she like the latest tech or gadgets or anything like that? Does she like beauty products that she can kind of, continue to improve her appearance or whatever? Or is she just outdoorsy? Does she like the latest running gear or maybe yoga or something like that? No matter what she's into, you can make her smile with a fruit or flower bouquet, makeup, tech gear, workout gear, and so much more. Just get all your Mother's Day gifts all in one place. Get 50% off your next order up to $15 when you spend $15 or more on your next flower, convenience, grocery, or retail order now with code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONBA. Order using DoorDash today. Terms do apply. Today's episode is also brought to you by LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you've got to check out LinkedIn Jobs. They've got the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. Believe me, I wish I'd used LinkedIn more when I was hiring people working in PR. It's so difficult to find all the time. You got to sort through all the resumes. You don't know if they're the right quality candidates. You got to schedule interviews. Oh boy, LinkedIn does so much of the work for you. It takes all the guesswork out. It's not just another job board. They've got a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. It gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. You can get it all done in less than a day. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats, and they might not have the time or the resources to find the right person. So they're constantly finding ways to make the process easier. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Yours should be next. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions to apply.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Make sure you are subscribed on YouTube and on your favorite podcast app. If you want to hear the entire Pat Riley press conference for yourself, we put that up on our YouTube channel. We also had our reaction minutes after the conclusion of Pat Riley's press conference from Kaseya Center. We have that up on our channel as well. I'm done sort of like mincing words about this and asking you kind of said what the Heat said yesterday before we went to this last break. If Jimmy Butler can't give you 70-plus games in the regular season and cannot be playoff Jimmy for you, then you can't pay him that extension. I'm going to go so far as to say that is not happening anymore. Jimmy Butler is going to be 35 years old next year. He has we have seen the wear and tear now over the last year and a half, right? This doesn't usually go the other way. You don't get to your mid-30s as an NBA player and get healthier. You don't get to 35 in the NBA and suddenly become able to play more basketball games at a higher level. That doesn't happen. Jimmy Butler's best basketball is behind him. And boy, was it great basketball. And man, was that Miami Heat era something special. But it's over. The Miami Heat's window is closed. This roster's championship window is closed. It is absolutely closed.
I don't know if I agree.
And Riley spent the entire press conference talking about what this team could be if it were healthy, but that's not happening. And I think Pat Riley knows that it's over. And I think it's why they don't want to give Jimmy Butler this extension, is because what are you extending him for? As the rest of the NBA gets better, and as the Boston Celtics rampage through the Eastern Conference, the Knicks are on the rise. Jalen Brunson looks like the best player in the Eastern Conference right now. You've got Anthony Edwards looking like Michael Jordan and Dwayne Wade in the Western Conference, taking down the team that you just got wiped with the floor with in the NBA Finals a year ago. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander on the rise. The rest of the league is only getting better. And these guys are 22, 24, 26 years old, and Jimmy Butler's going to be 35. The window is closed. And if the window is closed, then you have to consider, if you're the Miami Heat, well, then how do we get this thing open again? And the answer to that is not giving Jimmy Butler more money as he gets older and worse at basketball. That's not the answer. So I'm going to go far as to say this. I think the smoke and the fire and the noise has been enough. I'm at the point now, David, and it's not that I'm rooting for this. I'm just telling you what I expect. I expect Jimmy Butler to get traded this summer. If you had to make me bet on, is Jimmy Butler playing for the Miami Heat or one of the other 29 teams in the NBA next year, I'm betting on the field. Because I just don't really see the other way that this thing goes.
I understand your point. I get it. I also understand the idea of you can hold out hope. However, tenuous it might be or unrealistic. Like the idea was, and we said it before, we said it, at the start of the Boston series, we saw it at the end of this Boston series. Had Terry Rozier been out there, had Jimmy Butler been out there, had Duncan been 100% healthy, had even Jay Rich been available, like those were all players that were expected to contribute in varying degrees, certainly, but I think they would have helped a lot more. And had they been available, maybe you could have avoided the play-in tournament. Maybe you could have avoided Boston in the first round. Maybe you could have even gone further and deeper into the playoffs. Like Miami might still one of the top, still one of the 4 teams left in the Eastern Conference. It didn't happen that way, but that doesn't mean that the possibility wasn't there. So I don't know that I necessarily agree to the window being closed, because I don't know how open it was in the first place. I mean, we talked about it after the series ended. Like, in the path to a championship has historically been having a top 5 player available on the roster. Miami doesn't have that. They had something kind of close to it in Jimmy Butler, who was able to kind of put up historically good numbers for some playoff games during the last few seasons, but that's not necessarily enough to have a top 5 player during the course of the regular season and then have that player outperform in the playoffs. So I don't know that there's another opportunity for Miami to get a top 5 player. Certainly not. Like if you look at the top 5 players in the league right now, they're kind of set in stone. And look, Giannis is a top 5 player. He's home right now. There are other top 5. Off the top of my head, who else? Jokic, Embiid. Jokic might get swept by the Minnesota Timberwolves. Joel Embiid's home right now, and obviously he got hurt too, so that's a different situation. But you can look at 3 of the top 5 players, and they're not going to be available in the playoffs right now. Who else would you consider a top 5 player right off the top of your head? Shai Gilgeous-Alexander still there? I guess
I would consider the guy. Like to me,
Luka Doncic.
It's less of top 5, like putting a number on it, and to me, it's who can be the best. Who is a player capable of leading a team to a championship, not just a finals appearance. Because Jimmy Butler did that twice, but to winning the championship. Jimmy Butler did it twice, and those finals were not particularly close either, right? There was a gap between the Heat and the Denver Nuggets last year. So it's Jokic. I would have Giannis there. I would have Luka. I think I would have Embiid.
If he was healthy.
There's bigger questions with that, but if healthy, he's definitely part of that group. I think I have Shea in that group right now. And I'm pretty close to putting Anthony Edwards in that group. I don't know how you would at this point.
Yeah, he's been ridiculous. Like we talked about, like Jimmy making a leap from a really good regular season player to playoff Jimmy. Well, I mean, Anthony Edwards was a damn good regular season player, and he's just been a ridiculously good player.
He's on a 2006 Dwayne Wade run right now. Like that's what's happening. That's what's happening.
I got to be honest. Like I know it's ridiculous. I know it's been debated. Like who does he look like? I'm old enough to have seen Jordan. Those pull-up jumpers, the form and everything else like that.
I know.
It's ridiculous. I just see it on my head is like having flashbacks from the late 90s. It's like, it's Jordan-esque. It really is.
Yeah. I don't know that I would put Steph in that group anymore, but he was in that group 2 years ago.
Yep.
And so those are the players. So if you can't get one of those players, what do you do? And I think Jimmy Butler was able to kind of become that player for 3 months out of the year instead of 8 months out of the year. But that's just not good enough anymore. And I don't see, and like I said, I know that we didn't get a chance to see it, but I just don't expect to see it. He's going to be 35, closer to 36 by the time the playoffs come around next year. And the wear and tear on his body is real. I don't think that you could just crossing your fingers and hoping that playoff Jimmy is summoned out of nowhere as this guy gets progressively worse as he ages is not a strategy that I think one of the most successful people in NBA history, and Pat Riley, is very keen on employing. That doesn't strike me as a Pat Riley-like thing. And whatever happened to Heat culture? Heat culture to me isn't who cares about the regular season. I thought Heat culture, we play our asses off only when like only when the playoffs are around? No,
Right.
that's a qualifier on how hard you play. And I think Pat Riley is sick of it too. And I think that was part of why he was so frustrated yesterday. Is he was asked point blank if he felt like the culture eroded. He obviously said no, but he spent 95% of that press conference talking about how his players need to play. The hardest working, toughest, most physically in shape team in the league can't get to 60 games, has to play 35 different starting lineups. You know, like of course he's frustrated over this. So
if I had to guess how this plays out, and I think anybody who would offer any kind of opinion right now would simply be guessing. Like, we can read tea leaves as well as we might like, and I don't think anybody really knows much more about the organization and the way they operate than we do. At the same time, if I had to take what we're seeing and how every event has played out, I think they're going to explore whatever possibilities they can to improve the roster. They're not going to find any. You're not going to move Tyler Hero for Donovan Mitchell.
Right.
Like,
they're going to explore those opportunities before trading Jimmy or Bam. Like those non-Jimmy, non-Bam options is what you're talking about. Okay.
Yes, exactly. And then they're not going to find those options. And I think they're going to roll into the season with the same roster as last year with some minor changes here.
Well, you're skipping a step. What happens when Jimmy Butler asks for the contract extension?
He doesn't get it.
Okay.
And they're going to let the season play out. And they don't give a damn.
Does Jimmy let the season play out? That
to
me is my
question.
I think your option is what the Heat would prefer.
Yeah, I don't think the team is going to bend to Jimmy. I don't think they're going to bend. They're not going to. What we saw yesterday is, in terms of Riley's response and the kind of fire and defiance that he showed, I think is a guy who's like, look, we love you to death. We love everything you've done for us. But there's no good goddamn way you're going to get $60 million.
Well, then what happens? And then what happens? So Jimmy Butler says, "I don't want."
He has two options.
He
has two options. Yeah, to me, he has two options. He plays out the season, which is my expectation, and then he opts out, and he could potentially leave as a free agent. Or
why would he opt out?
Because he just doesn't want to be a part of Miami anymore.
$53 million. He's going to opt out of a $53 million player option.
Or okay, you're right. Not opt out, maybe not opt out, but then request a trade next season in the hopes that whatever team he gets traded to will then be able to give him that extension.
Why not explore that then now if you're Jimmy Butler?
If you're
planning on demanding a trade, and then if you're the Heat, then why? If you're not going to give into that trade demand now, then why would you give into it next summer? That's why I keep going back to this. I keep trying to get down to the path of, can the Heat bring it? Can Jimmy Butler play for the Miami Heat next year? And I'm honestly struggling, and I don't know if maybe it's recency bias of this fiery press conference or whatever, but I am struggling to getting to the point of how. And it feels easy for the status quo to be the easy part, the easy route, the easy way that this plays out. And to me, figuring out the steps of how we get back to Jimmy Butler being in a Miami Heat uniform next year is the hard part for me. I'm having a hard time figuring that part out. I would love to be wrong, but I'm like, that's where I'm at. You know,
he could seek a trade. He could seek a trade next offseason anyway. He can. It's opt in and still seek a trade next offseason.
But if you're the Heat, and if you think he's going to opt in or opt out or seek a trade, you end up being in the same place the Cavs are with Donovan Mitchell, where it's just like, well, we can't lose this guy for nothing. If he's willing to opt out of his contract, if that's a possibility, and he just walks away in free agency, then we've just lost Jimmy Butler for nothing. And I don't know. Maybe that's worth it. Maybe it's worth giving it one more shot and then letting him walk away for nothing. I'm not saying that there's nothing there. Another year of Jimmy Butler could be worth that risk, but it's just something you have to consider. We'll talk about some other options for Jimmy Butler this summer going forward. Did 76ers president Daryl Morey actually hint at a potential Jimmy Butler trade during his press conference on Monday? We'll talk about that next year.
Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. All right, game off. We got to pause there to talk more about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying. Flag on the play. You already talked about it. But there's just so much good stuff in this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for time tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. And the more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. There's so much to get, from unique stickers that you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes. You get cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with. Hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or heist their valleys. Did you ever play Monopoly as a kid? Obviously you had to, right?
Of course. Yeah.
Was your favorite piece? Did you have a favorite?
Big.
Do you have a favorite piece?
The thumbtack thing. What is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
I was a top hat guy myself, but you can get all kinds
Figures.
of new playing pieces. Yeah. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games like digging for treasure or a robot pachinko machine. And there's always new timed events to help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something to discover in Monopoly Go. So go get off the bench and go download it now for free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. We'll be right back.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube and on your favorite podcast app. I got some Jimmy Butler trade ideas, but before we get to that, up in Philadelphia on the same day that Pat Riley was giving his annual State of the Union address, 76ers boss Daryl Morey was doing his. He was asked what the 76ers' biggest need in the offseason is, and Morey was direct, saying, quote, someone at the wing who can play and deliver at a high level in the playoffs. That's the biggest need. It's easy, David, to draw a line between Morey's comments and some of the players that he might have in mind. He's already been connected, the Sixers have, to Paul George, to Brandon Ingram, to Jimmy Butler. But what did you make of Morey's comments? Do you think that he's talking about any one of those guys or anybody in particular?
I think there's only one direct line, and that's to Jimmy Butler. Like, if you're talking about playoff performer, I certainly don't think that Paul George nor Brandon Ingram have that kind of reputation for being a playoff performer, and
especially
certainly not at
Brandon
a high
Ingram
level
right now. Yeah,
certainly not Brandon Ingram, but I don't think Paul George necessarily does either. And given that, if there's a player that you're familiar with that makes Joel Embiid happy, that has learned how to play alongside Embiid, who has learned how to play alongside, I don't know, maybe that guy who we're probably going to re-sign for a veteran minimum, a point guard formerly of the Toronto Raptors, and Kyle Lowry.
Oh.
I could see somebody kind of fitting in alongside and maybe echoing in a new culture in Philadelphia, a guy like Jimmy Butler. So I would not be surprised if they wanted a full pursuit of Jimmy Butler, depending on whatever shakes up here in Miami.
I think their number one option is going to be to try to sign Paul George. It costs you nothing. He'd be a free agent. Okay. You could sign him into cap space. Easy, clean, simple, done. Paul George also, maybe not necessarily the playoff performer that Jimmy Butler is, but I think he's a better playoff player than he's been given credit for. And he's certainly had to carry the Clippers in a way that is unfair, right? It's not his fault that Kawhi Leonard keeps getting hurt and not able to finish postseasons. That's not necessarily the job that he signed up for, right? He didn't sign up to be Kawhi. He signed up to be Kawhi's Robin. He wasn't supposed to be Batman. The idea in Philadelphia is that Joel Embiid would be Batman. Again, some similar injury concerns, but that's a Locked On Sixers problem, not ours. So
Morey's negotiated with the Clippers before, if they have to do like a sign and trade or anything like that. I mean, or just like you said, sign him directly.
It would be very clean, right? And that's why I think ultimately that would be the number one option. It's easy. It's easy. If Paul George just re-signs with the Clippers, then the other option becomes trade, because at that point, all the good wings who have playoff experience are out. It's only Paul George in this free agency class as a potential free agent. There are no other potential free agents that sort of fit that bill. And so then you kind of go down the trade route, and you can use that cap space. They have $55 million worth of cap space. It essentially would work as a free agent signing, except you would have to send something out. And that something would be probably draft picks, because they don't really have players under contract. That's why they have so much cap space. It's like, okay, here's Paul Reed and draft picks, maybe. So that would be, but that's essentially what they'd be limited to in a trade. They're not trading Maxey. They wouldn't be trading Embiid. So you get beyond that, Tobias Harris is a free agent, right? So even that big chunky, that's not even a thing. So you start going down the list of wings who could be available in a trade, and that's why Jimmy Butler's name comes up, and it's why Brandon Ingram's name comes up. I think for the Sixers, number one preference, Paul George, easy, clean free agency signing. Number two, can we back channel and tell Bernie Lee, hey, if the Heat don't want to give you the extension, we will. And then Jimmy Butler demands that trade. That's the second option. If they cannot pry Jimmy Butler away from the Heat, then I suppose they're settling for Brandon Ingram, I guess, which, boy, that drop-off is.
Or LeBron James, right?
Yeah, I guess Sixers fans could dream of LeBron James. Who knows? I mean, yeah, LeBron could be a free agent, so maybe he goes, whatever. So those are the options. All right, we'll see what happens. You ready for my Jimmy Butler trade ideas?
Sure.
All right.
Not a lot of time, but we'll do it.
No, I'm going to knock them out real quick. We don't have to go through them, or should I save them?
Oh, a day-long tease. I don't think we've ever done it before. Like next segment, yeah, but I mean a day-long tease. I mean, I don't know how detailed they are. I don't even know how many you have. So if
I'll do them quick. Jimmy Butler, and you just give me like a 10-second, like, do you like it or not?
Okay.
Jimmy Butler and a first-round pick to Cleveland for Donovan Mitchell. Clean, easy, 2 teams, just easy. I don't think the Cavs want to do it because then they deal with the Jimmy Butler contract negotiations that they probably don't want to be dealing with. But that's an idea. I don't like it. Jimmy Butler to the Knicks for Julius Randle, Bojan Bogdanovic, and a first-round pick. Kind of hate that for both teams.
I think it cleans up a lot for Miami. But no,
sure.
I'd probably say no to that.
Yeah, and I wouldn't do that if I were the Knicks either. Jimmy Butler to Sacramento for Harrison Barnes or Kevin Huerter. You need one of those big chunky contracts. Keegan Murray, nice young player going into his 3rd year. Trey Lyles and Chris Duarte. Lyles is a good bench piece. I thought, a 6-man candidate kind of guy before he got hurt. Chris Duarte, just in there for salary purposes.
If you could reroute some of those other players at the end of it, yeah. But if you can get Keegan Murray, spot-up shooter, a young player, reset your window a little bit, yeah, it's a step back. But I think you can continue to build your roster. I'd say yes to that one probably.
I kind of love it for this, and I kind of love it for the Sacramento Kings.
Yeah, he gives them a personality that they did not have before.
Right, and a two-way wing and a guy who doesn't necessarily need the ball because De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis need it so much. I kind of like that if I were Sacramento. Jimmy Butler to his hometown Houston Rockets for Dylan Brooks, Steven Adams, and one of the young guys I have written in here, Tari Eason, but I think it would probably be up to the Rockets to maybe choose which one, or they would kind of give the Heat like a pool of 2 or 3 of these guys.
Yes, I guess so.
You would have to do
not happy about it.
You would have to.
Not happy about it.
Steven Adams would be that big veteran center that Udonis Haslem was talking about on First Take the other day. Dylan Brooks fills in as a defender on the wing. Tari Eason, good young player who I think people forgot about because the Rockets have so many good young players, and Eason was injured for all this season. Last one, Jimmy Butler to the Philadelphia 76ers for not 1, not 2, but 3 first-round picks for the pleasure of doing business. And you create a giant $46 million trade exception that you could use on potentially Donovan Mitchell. And I bet you that those 3 first-round picks would help in any of those trade negotiations.
Yes, you'd have to do it too.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube and follow us on your podcast app.